Visceral fat and the cannabinoids? Absolutely. Let's talk about the lean stoner paradox. I'm Lex Pelger. I do can education for CV Sciences, the makers of Plus CBD, who's excellent CBD and THC full spectrum products to help you with your metabolism. So the paradox is, why do people consume cannabis tend to have a leaner body type than people who don't, when everybody knows about the munchies and the increased appetite that comes from that? There's some guesses about different food choices and lifestyle stuff, but one of the biggest hypotheses is that it's changes to the metabolism of our fat. The first thing to know comes from a recent review paper. There is generally white fat and brown fat. White fat is what we use for energy storage. Brown fat is what we use for heat production. White fat is the kind that we have that increases with our age and with our body weight, while brown fat is the one that's highest in newborn infants and then tends to decrease as we get older. It's already well established that we have CB1 and CB2 receptors on our white fat and brown fat, but here's a recent study about how we have CB1 receptors on the mitochondria of our white fat. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, and it's an excellent way to regulate a cell's activity. So here's one more lever that the endocannabinoids are using to control our adipogenesis, or our formation of fat cells. If you want to read a review article on this subject, I think this is the best one. And actually, the final author is Danielle Piomelli, who is a great writer on this stuff, but also a great interviewer. I interviewed him for my podcast, The Lex Files, and it was episode number 40. One of the first things that he points out in this article is that the CB1 receptors seem to be involved with the fat stem cells and their differentiation process into fully mature white fat cells. The endocannabinoids also act as messengers around these processes. For instance, here in these white fat cells, they help to regulate lipogenesis, which is the formation of new lipids. You can also see here how they help to control that adipogenesis, which is the fat stem cells becoming regular white fat cells, and they do that via the PPAR receptors, which are nuclear receptors that sit on the nucleus and help to control the genetic transcription. Then in the brown fat cells, they also help to control that thermogenesis. So when you need to warm up, the endocannabinoids help to tell your body to burn these brown fat cells to throw more wood on the fire and keep you from shivering. One of the big questions he asks is, can you target the endocannabinoid system to help with obesity? And that has been tried once before, and it was not pretty. There's a famous story of a drug called Rimonabant, which is a CB1 antagonist. It blocks the CB1 receptor. And that drug got approved in Europe, but not in the US, surprisingly. And what happened when that drug got approved was, yes, blocking the CB1 receptor helped people to eat less and helped them to take off weight. But also, in a small subset of people, it led to severe psychiatric problems, which makes sense. You have CB1 receptors all over the top parts of your brain, and the drug was not restricted to the body. It was also working the brain as well. So the one time that we tried to block the CB1 receptor to help us lower weight was a big time failure that got the drug pulled off the market and caused a lot of harm before it happened. However, they are looking at other ways to try to manipulate the system, such as CB1 inverse agonists, which is where it binds the CB1 receptor but actually carries out the opposite of what the normal binding drug does. Or CB1 neutral antagonists, which kind of block it just by getting in the way, but they don't actually make it do the opposite thing. So there's a lot of different drugs here that could be subtly manipulated, but nothing's come to market yet. And for the rest of this video, I'll talk about the things that are in the plant that do seem to help. And one thing they mentioned is this recent study where they took overweight young men and then tested their fat, and they tended to have lower levels of CB1 receptors in that fat, so there would have been less for them to target, and that might be part of the reason of what's going on with their metabolism. First, our old friend CBD. In this study, they were looking at fat stem cells, and at certain levels of CBD, it caused them to not differentiate as much into the next phase of fat cells. In this study of stem cells that are derived from fat, CBD protected against the stress of the endoplasmic reticulum, where proteins are processed and things like that. And so this was seen as a helpful way to treat obesity. That was also found to be true for THC-V, which is the variant form of THC. It has a slightly shorter tail, and that tends to be found in the Durban strains of cannabis, among others. And there's been a good bit of work on THC-V as a treatment for obesity. Then for the PEA that is in our relief products, and I think will be the next great dietary supplement, and it helps with the conversion of white fat cells to beige fat cells, and the contributions of the genetic transcription to modulating that process. That paper had a great graphical abstract that showed the various ways that PEA helps to lower your fat levels and to modulate your metabolism around them. You also have work on THC acid, helping with obesity and fat levels. And finally, how even the omega-3 fatty acids found in fish oil help with a dysregulated endocannabinoid system in the fat cells and help to modulate that. And as many people know, fish oils and CBD and the cannabinoids go together. Mwah. So there's a lot about the mechanics of how the cannabinoids regulate our fat metabolism, but there's also a lot of clinical evidence there and surveys and things to back up the lean stoner hypothesis of, for some reason, people who ingest a lot of cannabinoids tend to be more lean and have healthier levels of fat.